Okay. I think Pindy switched on the recording. So good evening, everyone. This is the Institute of Classical Osteopathy. We're doing a free webinar tonight with very kindly hosted or presented by Jason Haxton from the Kirksville Museum of Osteopathy. We're doing these webinars as much as we can during this time. I hope everything is well. Obviously, most people aren't working or working very minimally under the sort of constrictions that we're allowed to. So at the Institute of Classical Osteopathy, we promote a traditional philosophy and principle-led osteopathy as originally taught by Andrew Taylor Still and then interpreted by John Martin Littlejohn and John Wernham. And we run postgraduate courses starting with the foundation course, which runs annually. And after completing this course successfully, osteopaths can enroll in a unique course we run at the London Clinic of Classical Osteopathy, where osteopaths get a clinical training treating patients and being mentored by classical osteopaths. And also for graduates of the foundation course, we run the fundamentals or advanced course, which again is a year or 18 months course, which really helps develop a deeper understanding and knowledge of osteopathy and classical osteopathy. So we run our foundation course, which is the base level course or the starter course really, and we run it in the UK and we run it in Spain and we run it in Italy and in Canada and Japan. So we're a very international kind of organisation. And in the UK we have an annual conference with 3 days of workshops either side, with internationally renowned speakers who come over from all the place. We had an American DO from Kirksville came over this year, which was really interesting. And we also had, sorry, there's a message coming in. And we also had several other really interesting people talking. And we run regular lectures and webinars throughout the year and produce newsletters, magazines, books, leaflets, documents, films and DVDs for information about classical osteopathy. And for any more information on that, if you go to our website, which is classical-osteopathy.org, you can get lots of information about the Institute of Classical Osteopathy there. So tonight we have a fantastic presenter on for us called Jason Haxton. I'm sure you're all aware of him. He's been the director of the Museum of Osteopathic Medicine since January 2001. He comes from a counselling background, so he's even though he isn't trained in osteopathy directly, he actually has a really great knowledge of the other components of the triune, as Still would have said, which is the mind and spirit, and not quite so much knowledge as the rest of us on the osteopathy technique side. So besides managing the museum, which was created in 1934, he makes multiple international trips every year, where he provides lectures and historic research materials and promotes the principles of osteopathic medicine through exhibits for osteopaths globally. And at the ATSU University in Kirksville, he keeps a busy schedule teaching medical students and welcoming guests from around the world to the museum. He's also collaborated in making a film in Germany, which is supposed to be released in spring this year, which I'm not sure what the situation with that is at the moment, with COVID-19 in full swing over here. And he also worked on The Science of Osteopathy, which was a documentary by Juan Castellón and Raúl N. Cortez, which was released in November last year. And Jason most recently worked on an Emmy Award-winning PBS documentary, which was called The Feminine Touch, which I'm sure some of you would have heard of, which was released in April 2017. And in this last year, he authored a book called Andrew Taylor Still, Father of Osteopathic Medicine, which is a biography for young readers aged 10 to 12. And this is the first book of its kind approved for school curriculum in social studies. So, you know, we're getting osteopathy into school level now, which is fantastic. And so Jason has received several grants totaling $600,000 for processing and putting online the museum's 100,000 odd artifacts. And he's also, in 2018, was his leadership at the museum was recognized as an American Osteopathic Association Shining Star organization for its work promoting the osteopathic profession worldwide. And Jason is an honorary alumnus of Kirksville College of Osteopathic Medicine and at the Andrew Taylor Still University. And so when he's not busy with doing all this kind of stuff, he is providing exhibits and lectures to international and American conferences on osteopathy, and he welcomes guests from around the world to the A.T. Still University in Kirksville to experience the rich osteopathic heritage at the founding school of Andrew Taylor Still. So I hand you over to Jason.
Okay. So are we going now and everything working out okay?
Yeah.
Well, guys, gals, osteopaths, international friends, I've been told to try to speak slowly, so I will do that to help you guys out. Coming from Kirksville, where the home of osteopathy, where Dr. Still felt that by being in this isolated area, osteopathy would not be basically changed from what it was, and I don't think it has in Kirksville, in the sense that we continue to be a source of a philosophy of healthcare, and we deal with the triune, as we mentioned, the body, mind, spirit. One of the things that Rob mentioned was the German PBS program that is out. There's actually 2 versions called The Hands That Heal, and it's actually in France and in Germany right now, and I think it's doing good to help people understand what it is that we do as osteopaths. That was also with the Science of Osteopathy from Juan Castillo, that's from Spain. So again, we're constantly working to help osteopaths throughout the world. And this is a form of healthcare that my family hasn't benefited from, and I have. And so I don't want ever to see this go away. There's not a member of my family that hasn't significantly benefit from osteopaths and the treatment of manipulation. As mentioned, we'll be doing with Osteopaths of Ireland on the 6th, a program on counseling, and that's my background. So as we look at the body, which is technique, and I won't give a lot of technique, but I'll give you sources for those, and then we'll look at mind, spirit. Rob is going to make available a file that all my material today comes from. So there's these rather lengthy articles that I've pulled off and condensed down into what will be our talk today. And I don't want to go too long and bore you, but I did have the chance to be on a program a couple of days ago with Alan Abdera and get his view as an MD and a DO, and we'll pull some of those ideas because I think he had some good things to say about COVID. Unfortunately, Dr. Still did not live during the Spanish flu epidemic. But what we have in those materials for you is flu and pneumonia, and treating people for those is pretty much the same idea. And so we do have in that material under the Barber book, Osteopathy, the New Science, the actual techniques used by Dr. Still himself for treating pneumonia. And we're going to talk about a little bit how Dr. Still would have treated this based on his work with basically diseases in general. Dr. Still would tell us that in order to understand a history, so if we want to understand what's going on now, we need to go before now and use that to help us understand more where we're at. And so, as Dr. Still says, you want to understand osteopathy, we have to go before osteopathy. If we understand how to work with this new COVID-19 flu, maybe we should go back to the last pandemic. And as I mentioned, Dr. Still died in 1917. It would have been valuable to see what he might have shared with us had he lived through that actual epidemic. But again, he gives us some clues, and we're gonna look at those aspects. If you remember, Dr. Still lost his children, and that is really what prompted him. It was 1863, and the war was pretty much coming to a close, the Civil War, and all of a sudden his children started getting sick, and 3 of them died as a result of what he called meningitis. He also had a 4th child that was an 11-month-old child. While he was fighting to save the lives of his 3 children from his first marriage, and this was, his wife had died, so that's why he had these children. His new wife's child caught a cold, it turned into pneumonia, and that child died too. And it was at this point Dr. Still started looking for understanding disease and ways of helping. He later, if you've read Research in Practice, explains what happened to those children. He said soon after they were dead and buried, he had gone to the well for water, and when he pulled up the bucket, out came a hen, a chicken, and it was decaying and putrid. This literally foul water was basically what the children were drinking. And he, again, always wondering cause effect, wondered why, if he drank this water, his wife, his hired hand, and his oldest child drank this same water, why did they have immunities from this water? And what he came to the conclusion is that they would scoop up a bucket of water, they would put it on the fire with coffee grounds, and these older adults would drink coffee all day. So that simple process of boiling the water to make coffee saved Dr. Still's life, where his children were drinking the water straight and basically ended up with the bacteria that killed them all. And then the youngest child that wasn't drinking the water, it was cold to pneumonia that basically killed that child. So losing 4 children really is what pushed him into wanting to find something more consistent, something that worked better. And so we do have some information as he did treat pneumonia. And again, that will be posted by Rob, or at least towards the end of this, he'll tell you where you can find that information. Another thing is that what Dr. Still says, the body is an amazing self-healing machine. It's one unit and it understands how to heal itself. But in the case of this COVID virus, and as was the Spanish flu, and we'll talk a little bit why it was the Spanish flu, what we find is the body attacks. The immune system is actually so strong that the immune system misunderstands and basically starts to create a greater problem. Sometimes when we look at diabetes, what happens is some infection happens and the body actually starts attacking the pancreas, something very vital and needed. And so again, Dr. Still was also aware that the body can make mistakes. And he tells a story in Lengthening Shadow of a young boy, and he's what we call a cooper. He makes these wooden barrels. And so you have these sharp tools that shave the wood to create these round barrels. And this young boy, he's maybe 15, 16 years old working, basically hit his leg with the sharp end of this tool and got a cut. Now, again, it wasn't life-threatening or anything, but within days, that cut became an infection and the leg swelled. And basically, the doctors were saying, we need to amputate this leg because he has a major infection in the leg. Well, Dr. Still was out of town, and the mother of this child was like, oh my gosh, for my young child to lose a leg and have to go through his whole life, this would be a horrible thing. I want to wait for Dr. Still and get his idea on this. And the other doctors are saying, well, you're going to lose your child if we don't take the leg. And she's like, I just want to wait for Dr. Still. This is such a horrible decision to make. Well, what ended up happening is that it was a day or two, and the mother was kind of getting to the point where she didn't know what else to do. And the evening before they were going to do the surgery, lo and behold, Dr. Still shows up. Now, it was always said he always had this kind of sense. It's as if he was so tuned into people and suffering that he almost knew where he was needed. And you'll find many stories where there was no reason for Dr. Still to be there, and he would appear as if he just sensed something wasn't right, and he showed up. So lo and behold, even though it's evening, he shows up at this house. Maybe he's heard through the grapevine, and he comes in and he looks at the boy, red streaks up the leg, major infection. It's really bad. And Dr. Still examines the leg a little bit, and he pulls up a chair, and he props up his feet, and he pulls his hat down over his eyes. And the mother's thinking, oh my gosh, we've been waiting for days. And he comes and he goes to sleep. And Dr. Still doesn't move for almost 45 minutes. And then he snaps up, walks over to the child, does an adjustment, and tells the mother that he'll be back in the morning. He thinks things are going to be fine. And it's like, what's that? What just happened? What Dr. Still was actually doing was going through his mind, what was the problem? What was happening here? And what could we do to fix the problem? So through the anatomy, through all the systems, the circulatory, healing processes, what he had decided was there was an element of swelling, and the swelling was keeping the natural blood flow from cleaning the disease, and that is what was happening. So the body's defense system, which might have worked initially to immobilize the leg so no more damage would happen, was now actually complicating the situation because no healing was taking place with basically the natural fighting of bacteria through good blood. And so by taking the swelling down, he permitted the blood to come in and start to clean. And sure enough, by morning, it was already better. And in the end, the leg was saved. But this goes to show you that the body can misunderstand things and react in a way that by being an osteopath or a spirit reflecting on the body, basically Dr. Still would sometimes adjust because the body might be interpreting things wrong. For instance, fever. Fever, Dr. Still it's not disease, it is cure. And fever is good in many cases until the fever doesn't stop, and now it's become dangerous. And in that case, we need to bring the fever down. And so things like this we would find. Another example of a case was typhoid fever, another infectious disease, much like what we're dealing with. This student, his name was Asa Willard, young man, probably 19, 20 years old, had gotten basically typhoid fever. Dr. Still himself had typhoid fever in 1876. He'd come up with the ideas of osteopathy. He was making a lot of money. He was actually doing some good. He had seen the light at the end of this tunnel, that it was going to work. And as you're working with patients, you get sick yourself, and he gets typhoid fever. It wipes him out from 1876 to 1877, 8 months, high fevers. Basically, he's not eating. He's not able to get out of bed. He said, I was sitting in bed contemplating, should I just let go and die? Because this is just so miserable. Maybe death is better. And he said, while I'm sitting here thinking about whether I should die or not, because I just don't know if I can take it anymore, he has a vision of his wife. And this is in his autobiography. And Mary Elvira, his second wife, comes up to him and says, look, your son has a job selling newspapers for the next month. We're going to be fine. You want to die? You die. If that's what you want to do. Dr. Still said he was so shamed. He was only thinking of himself. And in those moments, he realized his wife would survive without him, that she had the brains and the cunning, and she would make sure her family survived with or without him as a man, as a husband. And he said, I really realized I didn't want to finish this. I willed myself. He goes, the body was broken, but I willed my spirit to get better and get back to work. And I did. So we may have lost Dr. Still in 1877, but what he's telling us is your optimism, your belief system, this is actually very powerful. And what we're finding is with people with these diseases and some of the viruses, the worst thing is to be fearful. Yes, you may catch it, but keep the optimism, which is a natural healing process for the body. And so Dr. Still changes his way of thinking about his disease. He becomes positive. He wants to be there. He wants to, and he does get better. Now, we think these months of damage actually might have caused some nerve damage, because it's after this time we start seeing this walking stick. And later, for balance, and it's described when people who know him, close friends, oh, here comes Dr. Still up the aisle with his walking stick, which he used as balance. Alice Patterson. People who knew him knew that that stick wasn't a threat. It wasn't a weapon. It was for balance. Dr. Still never did anything extra. In his boots, he had put in orthotics, and he pitched his feet towards the center, which gave him better balance. So we see the results of this disease, but it didn't destroy him. And it gives him some information. So now Asa Willard's dying of typhoid fever. Now he's been sick for several weeks, but the family was afraid to let Dr. Still know that this student was dying. They didn't want to really bother Dr. Still. So Dr. Still every day goes for a walk. He says every day, and this is something during these times for you guys, get out in nature, commune with nature. We are products of nature. Nature heals us in body and soul. So we need to get out every day. Every day you should take a walk. And Dr. Still himself would go out, he'd get a walk, he'd catch up the news, and he heard from one of the neighboring persons that, too bad about that student dying. Dr. Still was like, what student's dying? It's like, well, Asa Willard. Dr. Still hadn't heard. His family had protected him. They didn't want him to be, upset with this student who was definitely going to die. Well, Dr. Still goes and sees Asa, and he's looking really bad. And Dr. Still was in that same position in 1876. He says, Asa, you got a really bad fever. He goes, fever is not bad. And this is what we're being hearing about this disease, that don't take aspirin, don't take ibuprofen. The same information that Dr. Still was giving was, do not use these aspirins in this case because it will hurt you. During the Spanish flu, what they were saying, the osteopaths, was like, don't take aspirin, don't take morphine for comfort, because the comfort will actually disassociate the mind and body, and you're at greater risk. You will die peacefully, but you're more likely to die. Better to be a little uncomfortable. So what happened with Asa, he says, Asa, he goes, the fever is not the problem. The fever is your defense, and it's burning out this disease. You need to stick with it. But I'm kind of afraid, and this is, again, in Lengthening Shadow, you can look it up in the back section, because I'm a little bit afraid that you're giving up. And if you give up, then it's done. Are you giving up? Are you sticking with me? And Asa replied, I am. He goes, and you're going to be fine. The actual treatment Dr. Still did was very minor, and it's described. Asa said, what he did to me, and he was a student of osteopathy, he did just a minor adjustment to make sure there was the natural flow, open everything up. But he goes, in the end, basically it was probably the optimism that did more for me. And that's what Dr. Still often said. In many ways, it is your hopefulness that can help your body to keep fighting, to help you when nothing else is going. So again, these are simple ideas, basic treatments to make sure everything is loose, flow, the body can function normally. Don't fear fever. Don't take medications necessarily for the fever. And basically what happens is keep an optimism that you're going to get better. Have things you're fighting for. And if you're fighting for, things will work out okay. So we have these examples of Dr. Still in his own life and with a patient, how he fought these infectious diseases, what he felt was most important, and what we can do when we work with ourselves and our patients to keep that optimism, to do the simple techniques to keep things in. Granted, you'll hear about raising the ribs and things. You have to expel this mucus and fluid because, as we know, the immune system starts going haywire. And what's happening is, in some cases, your immunities are basically what ends up killing you. This is why these young people's lungs would fill with fluid. They'd turn blue and purple. And that's why, for a while, this disease, it was the purple flu, because they would basically just drown on their own mucus. And so the idea is to keep things clear, keep things moving in the body. And so it's unfortunate, again, that Dr. Still died in 1917, because it would have been nice to have some more of his thoughts on how we deal with this unique kind of pandemic. But as I mentioned, I was with on a broadcast a couple of days ago, I think on Friday, with Alan Abzera, and what he said is, remember, and as Dr. Still would say, the virus is a living thing, and it's come into the body as its host, and that we need to focus on, it's not bad, it's not evil, it is infiltrating and becoming into our system for its own purposes. And so again, he advocated the same thing. No, and he's an MD and a deal, but no aspirin, simple techniques for flow. Don't take the fever out. The fever is necessarily a good thing. And optimism. Again, that was something that he brought in, probably his message, when people, I think, were waiting for the magic technique, but it is consistent in working with osteopathy. So where does this thing come from, these flus? I mean, we know this supposedly came out of Wuhan, China, and maybe the markets and stuff. Well, our best guess is looking back to the Spanish flu, and we have this basically from an Oxford professor of virology at St. Bart's and the Royal London Hospital. He did a lot of research on the Spanish flu, and they believe that it came out of etaples. I'm not French, but basically ETAPLES. But basically in northern France, he believes we're in a war. So let's go back to World War I and what was happening. We've got all these nations fighting in a war. Now, the only nation that was not involved in the war was Spain. So it was kind of out of the loop in this process. Everyone else is fighting, and the war is just dragging on and on. I mean, we're running out of supplies. The Germans, what ended the war basically was two things. We ran out of stuff and this disease that propped up right at that point. And the combination is what ended really World War I. So things were never resolved. That's why World War II came up. World War I didn't resolve a thing. It just ground to a halt. And the Spanish flu, as it is called, was that. Why the Spanish flu? Because Spain did not have a blackout on information and deaths. So when people started dying in Spain, the information was released and everybody focused on, oh my gosh, this thing's coming out of Spain. It actually was happening everywhere, but there was such a lockdown on deaths and information, we didn't look to France and say, it's the French, it's the French flu. No offense to the French. I got a lot of good French friends, but we're sitting in these foxholes. And we basically, it's muddy, it's cold, it's wet, things the virus loves. This is why we're hopeful that as things are warming up, this virus will basically drop down. Now, it will rear its head possibly as soon as the cold comes back, because viruses need basically several things. They need cold, and they need to be able to pass through. They need people confined. Once we're outdoors and away from people and there's air and it's warm, viruses have a hard time surviving. So we're in these wet, muddy, nasty foxholes, and we've got our food supply. We've got chickens and we got hogs. This is the food. Now, here's the thing. These are bird flus. That's why they're called novel viruses. They're things that we have never seen before. And typically, we as mammals don't catch things from birds, because birds are basically, let's get down to it, reptiles. They're the little dinosaurs that never died. And I know some of you are like, what? No, it's really there, because I've raised chickens. We live in Missouri. We've got, our kids do farming things. We've raised chickens, we've raised ducks, and we've raised basically turkeys. So we've raised all these poultry, and they're basically lizards. Their eyes, they're like a lizard. They go opposite directions. They've got beaks to tear. They've got claws. They've got scales, these feathers. They're lizards. I always think it's funny when somebody will eat crocodile or alligator and they say, oh my gosh, tastes just like chicken. Why not? Chicken's just a reptile, just a nasty lizard. Lizard tastes like, chicken. Snake tastes like chicken. Everything tastes like chicken, because chicken are all these nasty things. Now, I eat a lot of chicken, but all I'm saying is when we look at it, it's a reptile. It has nothing to do with us. But we also have in the foxhole the pigs. And the pigs align very closely to the humans. We use the pigs for a lot of experimentation on humans. We use pigs' aortas and valves for our own hearts, and they work just fine. So there's a relationship with pigs. There's not a relationship with chickens, but we're all sitting in the foxhole together, and we get the flu, and we give it to the pig. That's a lot like us. The chicken gets a flu, and the chicken is actually closer to the pig. So the pig and the chicken, they share their disease. So now we've got this mixing pot of chicken, hog, and human, all mixing their diseases and all transferring those around. And lo and behold, we come up with a new virus that we've never seen, a novel virus, basically, and we call it the Spanish flu, because it's the Spaniards that are releasing the information on these horrible numbers of deaths. And so that gives us back a picture how it gets. So now the war has ground to a halt. There's no supply. Everybody just ran out of stuff. There's just nothing to fight with. And so we stop and everybody goes home, and they take this virus back home. So we believe, at least 50 million deaths, maybe as many as 100 million, because no one's keeping records of it. It's just happening. And to some degree, the United States got off pretty easy. We think we lost about 500,000, 500,000. But in proportion to the rest of the world, we actually got off pretty easy with that number. But what we're looking at is this is why the Spanish flu was so devastating. And like anything else, it peaked for 2.5 years and then went away. And so it was a disease that attacked basically the immune system to basically infiltrate and attack the rest of your body. So we need to look at these kinds of aspects as we're thinking about this this virus. And so, maybe by understanding that. So what are we looking now? In theory, and again, everybody's looking, but did this come out of marketplaces where people were actually in unsanitary conditions with animals? Supposedly there's a scaly looking kind of sloth-like anteater creature that might be where it came from. Bats, again, animals that we don't typically eat or interacting with may have been food sources for these people. And as a result, this is one of the possibilities for how this novel virus entered into the human population. And then the difference is we don't have a war where everybody went home. We've got airlines. We're such a global market. So it doesn't take but a few airplane trips, and all you know is it's all over the world instantly. And it's hard to bring it all back in once it escapes. And so we're hopeful that as weather is warming, we don't know. Every virus is a little different. This is why we can't use Tamiflu. The molecular structure of this virus, which is a living thing, is not the same as most flus. So we just can't use Tamiflu and take care of it. So we're looking for what may affect this virus. And they're having some promising results. The thing is, we've come a long way in antivirals. One of the most amazing stories, which I don't know that people really tell, is which HIV. I mean, that was the last pandemic or epidemic was in the 80s when we talked about HIV, AIDS, and how it struck and there was no way to protect you and you would die from it. The difference is it wasn't contagious from merely touching or breathing around a person, though it took us a while to figure that out. But what we have today is Truvada. We actually have an antiviral that will keep you from catching this disease, like 99.5% of anyone who uses this antiviral will be protected. And it's these very antivirals that were taking the most pestilent virus of AIDS and basically preventing us from getting it. We're looking at those because there seems to be some success in using these very, very tough antivirals against this COVID virus. So again, that is what we're looking at. What do we have in stock that might have an effect? Another thing we're hearing greatly about is vitamin C, that for whatever reason, and we've been advocating this for a long time, orange juice, vitamin C, things that have citrus, these are great for anti-cancers. And of course, you always say, wow, there's no, that's all circumstantial. That's, qualitative information. It's not quantitative. We don't have the numbers. But we have this feeling that vitamin C is always good within the system to fight off impurities and things that come into the system. And we're hearing now that vitamin C is one of the greater things that you can do. And so, of course, I'm on my 1,000 milligrams of vitamin C and drinking my orange juice every breakfast. But again, these are things that might help, as we look at kind of this information. I hope this has been kind of helpful for people. We're going to open up for discussions and things I can't answer, maybe Rob can answer. We're going to make available the articles that all this material is in and the techniques. As osteopaths, you can certainly look at those and see if they can help. Again, but they are, as Alan says, pretty basic health. The thing is, what we're doing is we're trying to bring health back to the person. Osteopathy is a philosophy based on health, and the healthier you are, the better your system is to fight off disease. Disease is natural. One of the things that Alan had mentioned is that disease gives the body a break. For some reason, maybe there's something out of kilter in your life, and actually the disease in general, when you're sick, pulls the body away, so you take time out, you refocus, and then you come back, improved and basically ready to fight again. And so, as he looked at this, Alan also mentioned that when we do things against nature, and Dr. Still might have this philosophy too. He's not here, but I'm saying we know what he felt about nature. When we do things against nature, we're killing these animals that are going extinct. We're basically involved in situations such as war, where we're putting animals in things that they in situations they shouldn't be in naturally, free roaming, living clean and natural, but we brought all this together. Dr. Still says you want to break down a body, get rid of the purity system. He goes, in your body, as soon as the urination and the defecation go, if anything that basically cleans the waste out goes, you're in trouble. He goes, it's no different in the city. Dr. Still always loved analogies. You stop the trash pickup and you stop the waste disposal in your city, and you see how quickly that city basically disintegrates. And so, as we know, we need to keep clean and pure. And Dr. Still, one of the things was always keep as clean and healthy as possible to maintain your health. He was always looking at people saying, you're too dirty. You need to clean up. I don't even want to do a treatment on you until you clean your feet. I can't tell where your foot is and where the dirt is. So in many ways, in working with some young kids and stuff, he goes, clean yourself up. Dr. Still wore the same clothes because he used the money of not buying new things for the poor, but he was clean. No one ever said he wasn't clean. He just wore the same things and he kept them clean. And so what we're looking at, when we attack nature, and in this way, were some animals being eaten, driven to extinction? Did we attack nature in such a way? And this is from Alan. I'm not saying these, but he goes, have we caused nature to turn on us? And look what's happened with this disease. Venice, I was at Venice. The waters are crystal clear and there's animals and things have come back into the system of Venice that haven't been there in decades. Same with China. Suddenly the smog has cleared. You look on maps, as people are self-contained and isolated, we are actually cleaning the world. And maybe we'll go back and look at this and say, hey, maybe there's things we can do to give nature a chance to keep things clean, to work in harmony. And so Alan's thinking maybe some of the things we've done have brought nature's wrath so that we stop, think, take a pause, and come back healthier. And so again, I hope this talk has been helpful for you guys, gives you some things to think about. We have the material that would tell you the techniques to use. Rob, I ask you to come in and maybe share something.
Hi, Jason. Can you hear me? Okay.
I hear you fine.
Yeah, I was always fascinated by the stories of the osteopathic hospitals in 1918, treating them. Could you tell us a little bit about the hospital facilities that they had and how that kind of worked? So I know before the sort of Flexner piece of governance in 1910, there were lots of different schools of medicine and eclectic hospitals and that sort of thing. But what was happening around 1918 when I know they had reports of a couple of 100,000 people in osteopathic hospitals and they had a 0.25% mortality rate, whereas the orthodox medical hospitals at the time had a 9% mortality rate. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, Rob. Well, this goes back to looking at George. So when A.T. Still dies, it is actually his brother's kid, Summerfield, and his which is his nephew and his great nephew, George Still. George Still, and they start the Des Moines School. So they're actually in competition as a family, friendly family business. So George Still actually becomes the president. So we've got a family, but George Still was a brilliant surgeon. He had gone to Northwestern, he had gone to Drake and to Kirksville's school before becoming an osteopath. So he was very well educated and he was a brilliant surgeon. And he actually, one student got distraught and shot himself in the heart with a gun. And of course, imagine in your school, a student shooting themselves. Well, of course, everybody arrived. And of course, George, the president, after A.T. Still died, George Still shows up and there's the hole still smoking. And of course, being a curious surgeon, he takes his finger and he sticks it in the hole. And as soon as he sticks it in the hole, someone says, we've got a pulse. And so Dr. Still was saying, George Still said, gosh, well, it sounds like we can save this guy. So they open him out, they pull out the bullet, they stitch up his heart, and basically the guy survives. So what we're seeing is he was a brilliant man. First open heart surgery with success, or one of the first in America, made national news. But here's what George said. He goes, it upsets me that we have these infectious diseases and we're mixing them with the surgical cases. These audiences need to be isolated. The staff and the patients of the infectious disease hospital should never cross paths with anybody in the surgical. And so when we look at the hospitals, it was actually the osteopaths, because they just brought everybody together. He goes, no, we are creating a nightmare. And this is exactly what we're saying by social distancing. Keep the infected people away from those that are not infected. Find out who is infected and isolate them. So George Still was actually preaching this in Kirksville. They created their own hospital. They took a house and they outlined it with beds and facilities and things. And what we discovered was that we used it only for a month. And then it very quickly, because we're so isolated, the Spanish flu in Kirksville didn't last very long. I'm hoping that the COVID doesn't last very long either, partly because we're already isolated. We already have space. It's not that people won't catch the disease, but it's when they all catch it at the same time and come in at once. It's like a tsunami of people. We can trickle it down and deal with them case by case. And 80% of the people, what we're hearing is, aren't going to have an effect. It's the 20% that need the attention. And if suddenly we have a wave of those 20%, we can't deal with it. And now we're going to have to choose who lives and who dies. And so this is why the social distancing seems to be working to basically break down this wave to just a flat kind of a tide, and so that it can be dealt with. The same number of people will get sick, but over maybe months versus weeks. And it's just, we can only have so many people working to help. And so we can't deal with the onslaught. That's what will kill people more, is because of the rapid numbers. And so we're doing everything to keep those down. So I hope that answers about, we were ahead of the curve on infectious diseases and separate hospitals.
It's we have a question from Andrea.
Yeah.
Kami. And they say, what do you think osteopaths should do during the corona these days? That's a bit, that's not being a medic. I'm not entirely sure that's an entirely fair question.
Well, and I think that's the thing is, I think because they're dealing with major crisis, I do think that as things level off, there's more opportunity for the osteopaths to be involved. There's certainly, we're all losing, well, one thing is just gym and exercise and work. As we're staying inside, people are trying to be active, but it's hard to be active, not to just sit and eat. And so certainly as we work with our patients, keep in touch with our patients about how can we remember, osteopathy is a philosophy of health, and it deals with not just the body, but the mind and spirit. Sometimes that person on that table, you do a treatment on saying, for the most part, they're pretty much in great shape. So why are they here? And yet they still say they hurt. But maybe this is a patient that has lost a loved one, or kids are gone. Basically, they're in isolation. And they come to you because you're a caring person who actually touches them and brings them the human contact. Dr. Still said, I love to love and be loved. Don't you? And we do realize that this feeling of love, this just unfiltered love, this is actually the way you should approach every patient. Because when you're not really focused on loving and wanting the best for this person in any way you can, if you're worried about the bills and you're worried about what you're going to do at 6 o'clock and something's coming up and you're going through all these things in your mind, you're not focused on this person. There is a connection when you truly are invested in that person. And many of your patients are coming to you for that alone, that body-spirit connection. The actual physical might be pretty little. And we hear, in some ways the body will throw itself back into alignment if you give it enough time. You hear these different things, but what can you give them? You can give them the idea of what can you do to build your health. Now, Dr. Still says we're not going to prevent death, but we can procrastinate it. We're procrastinating it so that you get every inch out of this journey. Who wants a quick weekend vacation if you can have 10 days? The idea of osteopathy is life is a journey, and we're in a real tough journey right now, but we learn from this journey. And in this journey, our souls become better. Dr. Still says, I do believe there will be something more at the end of this. He goes, what we do is we learn. And what? At the end of our life, it's gone? He goes, nature doesn't work that way. Nature conserves. Nature basically, now man is wasteful, but nature doesn't. Everything has a purpose. And if we learn, we don't instantly have no use for that. Nature would never waste. So there must be something coming. So we're in this journey. And so the whole idea of an osteopath is to encourage the health of the patient for the best journey possible. And again, we're on a journey right now. We're going to learn a lot about ourselves. I hope you'll take time to come to Osteopaths of Ireland, and we're going to really talk about the mind-spirit counseling aspect that I feel is my strength. Yeah, I did the Kirksville Crunch on my wife yesterday, and she feels a lot better, but I'm no osteopath. I just know a few techniques.
Okay, well, we've had a couple of people say a couple of things from Marika, who said, so maybe some advice to all osteopaths is to contact your patients and to ask how they're feeling and see if you can help them in some way, which is a good thing. Because you can talk to people and you can encourage them to be positive and I think one of the things that helps people through is being positive and being grateful for what we do have and suddenly realizing how lucky we were before we were in this lockdown kind of situation.
That's exactly it, Rob. So connect what we're doing. The reason we've got these people here today, we're connecting. We feel a need for this connection. And who understands us better than ourselves? Yeah. But your patients are needing the same connection. Yeah. It's with Dr. Still, it was soul to soul and it was instant. Be soul to soul with your patients. Let them know you're there. Maybe there's ways that you can help them just by reminding them of keep positive, eat well, and try to get some exercise. Get outside if you can. I mean, again, if there's the opportunity in cities, no. But if you're in a place where you can, like I am in Greentop, I walk every night 3 miles. Again, connect with nature. This is who we are. And it has a very powerful healing for the body and the spirit.
Yeah, it's a fantastic thing, and it's we do need to get outside as much as we can, and walking in the woods and walking in nature has been shown to be fantastically good for us. So we do need to do that, and we are allowed to get some exercise outside once a day at the moment. So we should be making the most of it. Tab has said the healing power of unconditional love, and that is incredibly true. I think we do tend to forget about the mind and spirit thing, with all the other things that we have to think about at the clinical coalface on a day-to-day basis. And it is such an important thing, that connection between us and the patient, rather than just looking at their biomechanics. That is a part of it. But part of it, as Jason said, is what's going on with the patient, and that fits into what A.T. Still was saying, what John Martin Littlejohn was saying, what John Wernham was saying, and what over the last 20 years now we have this movement called the biopsychosocial movement. So it's not new, that's what osteopathy was about. It's not a biomechanical thing. It's that is part of it, but it is only part of it.
And I love this quote, Rob. This Dr. Still made it very clear. As an osteopath, you get all this knowledge, you get all this anatomy. You got to know anatomy because anatomy leads to physiology and physiology leads to pathology, but you got to have your anatomy. But he says, forget all that for 1 minute. Before you even touch a patient, comprehend that within dwells a soul. Yeah. So don't even touch that physical body till you have comprehended there is a soul within. So what can we do for our patients? We can remember it's the soul and connect. And I think Marika gave us some great ideas on that. So thank you for reminding us that, we need to reach out to our patients. They're struggling too. And in that connection and love for them, you will go back. They will be there for you. Just like me. I'll be at my hairdresser as soon as I can get out of here. I'm sorry you had to live with this. But same with my osteopath. My wife would be in a heartbeat. She wouldn't have her husband doing quackery, my poor technique, but she'll settle like me. My son's coming next week. He's going to cut my hair, and hopefully I'll survive it.
Henry Lee's asked you, I expect you know Henry, most of us on here do. He mentioned Complete Osteopathy by Barber, the book you mentioned earlier, and
Yes.
the techniques. He says about how delightful the techniques illustrated in there, and he was asking if you knew whether Barber was instructed by Still.
Yes, Elmer Barber. Here's the secret of the Barber book. So when you get Osteopathy, the New Science by Elmer Barber, which was published in 1896, it is actually the first book on osteopathy. Mm-hmm. Barber was a student in the second group, and he took notes. He gathered, and as soon as he graduated, he published this tiny little book of what he learned. Mm-hmm. Dr. Still was livid. It's like, oh my God. And of course, Barber, being a young man, was like, well, what are you upset about? Dr. Still said, I'm upset about several things. One, my 20 years of work, and it's got your name on it. Two, basically, osteopathy is going to grow. And right now, this makes it seem like it's just a couple pages. There is more. He goes, three, it's all techniques. Osteopathy is a philosophy of health. You've ignored all the other elements of mind and spirit and diet. Dr. Still would often put a person on a diet for a month before he'd even touch them, because until they're healthy, it won't do any good to do a treatment. It won't stick. Yeah, so we see these things that the Barber book, though it actually shows the techniques, it misses what Dr. Still thought was the philosophy. And you say people can use your book without training? They're going to hurt people. So in many ways, Barber's book is actually pure Dr. Still technique. But we'll take that part of the philosophy if that's all I can get. But the other thing about it is Barber didn't get it. He goes, I took the notes. I asked your patients. This is exactly what you did, which is why when we look at pneumonia and flu, that basically will give us a clue. What I'm willing to do is I'll send the PDF of the Barber book, because it's out of print, to you, Rob, and you can post it. So anybody who wants to see the Barber book, we can make it available.
I think I've got that here anyway, so we can make that available through the Institute if anyone wants that. And as well, remember, there's all the big file. It's got I think it's about 20 different documents in that 1918 Spanish flu file that you put up for everyone last week. I'll get the Institute to put up a listing of where they can find that as well. So we've got another couple of people commenting rather than asking questions, really. There's got Joria Vieira who said, that's brilliant and very inspirational. Thank you very much. And we've got Kami saying thank you. And we've got Pindi saying, hello, Sandy, to Sandy.
Sandy Antudes, probably.
Of course, it could be Sandy.
In Toronto. And if you say hi to Sandy, you got to say hi to Chris, though we really love Sandy.
And Marika also says that she thinks that that for all of us osteopaths, we need to look outside of ourselves, and by doing this, we can give love and get a huge amount back. And she thinks you should go for a pigtail as well.
Marika, being the former president of the EFFO, again, she's there for you. She's done some great work, and I think her ideas, again, she's a person I trust immensely. And so thank you, Marika, for those ideas.
Okay, what have we got? We've got
if you go to the Early American Manual Therapy, there's actually a website, and you can pick up a lot of the early books for free online.
Archive.org does the same as well, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I think you can pick up free PDF files from there. I think we may even have some which are we've put through a digitizing process, so they're searchable. I mean, so some of the text isn't great, so it's not a fantastically accurate search, but it's better than no search. So you can look up things like Spanish flu or just flu and pneumonia and things like that, and it should come up in the search criteria. So
one of the questions was, do I know anybody that's working with Corona right now? Mohammed, I think, was asking that. And yes, as we've got physicians that are, they've been with Dr. Still for over 100 years here in Kirksville, the Levine family and the Steinbein family, and they're treating the front line, and they always say, anytime you can use osteopathic technique in a patient visit, you do it. You can always do some good. And I have no doubt that raising the ribs, there are things that are very traditional that they're using to help patients expel the mucus and breathe easier, and the body will heal itself given the opportunity.
Yeah, there is a lot of techniques. I think in Donna Mueller in her 2017 paper, which was talking about the Spanish flu, and she was mentioning that it was difficult to decipher some of the results of what was happening in the osteopathic hospitals back then. And it's great that you've shed some light on that, because she says the osteopaths back then sometimes were medics too, and they may have been prescribing stuff, but it sounds like from what you're saying, they were using sort of the old-fashioned pure 10-fingered osteopathy, doing the rib raising, probably making sure their clavicles were off the thoracic duct, some lymphatic pump techniques to increase their white blood cells, and also the stuff to calm down their sympathetic system, and
Right.
suboccipital inhibition that's still very much advocated for his own migraines, the first osteopathic adjustment.
Well, and you're right. Core, though he was a PhD, the parasympathetic and what you can do, the things that we don't control. And of course, if we're on a level of stress, it's like stripping the wire. There is no there's no insulation. And normally we get a bang, we go up, and then we come back down. But when you're constantly in stress, and we've been in this mode with this disease, remember that sometimes just bringing the stress level down, getting people to breathe, getting outside, getting to think about other things, this change your thinking, and you change your feeling. You can't be anxious when you're thinking anxious thoughts if you're anxious, but you can't be angry and sad at the same time. It's what you're thinking. And so same with, bring their thinking to a level of what they can do, put them in control. These are things that we'll talk about, like I said, next week. And thank you for having me. I keep communicating, reach out to your patients. They're needing you. If you have their emails, a phone call, take that opportunity while you have time to not drive yourself nuts. If you're doing something, you're being productive.
Well, thank you so much for coming on this evening, Jason. It's been fantastic. Everyone is on here has really appreciated it, and we had more people trying to join, but we have a maximum limit of 100 on these Zoom meetings, and we're up to 100, and people still trying to log on to listen to what you had to say. So
we'll be giving a similar talk tomorrow. So if you get the word out for people that missed it today, maybe post if you missed it. There'll be a very similar talk with another group through Diego Gomez, who's listening to this talk right now. And Mervyn, thanks Mervyn too.
All right, well, we better let you go now. So thank you very much, Jason. Thank you for joining us. And I would try and join the Spanish one tomorrow night, but I think it's unfair if I join it, and I would stop other people trying to get on.
Okay, thanks, Rob.
All right,
and thanks, Pindy, for making this happening. And she herself is working with her own health issues, and was determined to make sure you guys had this information. So, Pindy, real trooper. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. It's great doing all of this with you guys. I love it.
Now what? Mama.
I want all your attention, Mummy.
It's exactly like that. Sorry. Yeah, sorry guys, you wrap up.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jason. Okay. Thank you very much, Pindy. Also, we do have our Institute of Classical Osteopathy webinars, which are usually a paid-for thing, but every couple of days we're putting them out for free during this lockdown period, so people can still be thinking about osteopathy and still be looking at osteopathy and enjoying osteopathy, which is what we all tend to do. We do it because we love it. So we will put out through social media all the various webinars that we're giving away every couple of days. I think that about wraps it up. So thank you very much for everyone who attended. We had 104 people on, so I don't know how we managed to squeeze that extra 4 on. I guess that was me, Pindy, and Jason. So thank you very much, and good night, everyone.